Ambassador had presided over the committee for 200 cycles, and in all that time nothing had surprised him. The galaxy operated on rules that were older than most stars. Species developed, they reached for space, and if they survived long enough, they eventually learned to knock on the council's door with the proper deference. That was how it had always been. They had established this order 47,000 years ago, along with the other founding races. The Empire brought military discipline. The Silicate Collective offered their mathematical precision. They provided economic networks that spanned 3 spiral arms. Together, they had built something that worked, something stable, something predictable. His office overlooked the council chambers, a massive sphere that hung in space above the neutron star they called Foundation. From here, he could watch the representatives of 300 species debate, negotiate, and occasionally threaten each other. But they all followed the rules. They all knew their place. His data pad chimed. A message from the monitoring station in the outer reaches of the Perseus arm almost ignored it. The outer stations dealt with pre-FTL species, and those were rarely interesting. Most destroyed themselves before achieving faster-than-light travel. The ones that didn't usually took thousands of years to develop anything worth noticing. But protocol was protocol, so he opened the file. The subject line read, "Unusual transmission from Sol 3 classification, pre-FTL no contact." Secondary eyes scanned the report while his primary eyes continued watching the council floor. A junior technician named had intercepted some kind of artifact. It had been drifting through space for 43 local years, which meant the species that launched it was probably extinct by now. Pre-FTL civilizations were fragile like that. Still had flagged it for review. The young had included a note, "Ambassador, you need to hear this. I can't explain why, but please listen." Sighed. Young technicians were always so dramatic, but he keyed the playback anyway. At first it was just noise. Crackling and hissing, the sound of cosmic radiation interfering with primitive electronics. Then something emerged from the static. A voice. No, multiple voices, speaking in a language the universal translator struggled to parse. "Greetings from the children of planet Earth," one voice said. Then another voice in a different language. Then another. 55 languages in total, the file noted. All from one planet, all from one species. That gave pause. 55 languages meant this species hadn't achieved planetary unity. They were still divided, still separate, yet they had worked together to send this message. Curious. Then came the music. His hand froze over the data pad. He had heard music from thousands of species. They themselves were known for their harmonic compositions, pieces that could last for days and required perfect mathematical precision. But this was different. The first piece was something the file labeled as Brandenburg Concerto. It was structured, mathematical even, but there was something organic about it. Something that suggested the composer had felt the mathematics rather than simply calculated them. Then came something called Johnny B, and nearly dropped his data pad. It was chaotic, wild, built on patterns that made no logical sense yet somehow worked. They would call it undisciplined. The Silicate Collective would call it computational noise, but found himself listening to the entire piece, then playing it again. The file contained hours of material, images of the species themselves, bipedal creatures with bilateral symmetry, and an unusual amount of variation in their external appearance. Pictures of their planet, blue and green and white, unremarkable except for the sheer diversity of ecosystems. Mathematical concepts, scientific diagrams, even a map showing the location of their home system using pulsar triangulation. That last part was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, possibly both. But what struck most was a single piece of music labeled "Dark was the night, cold was the ground." It had no words, just the sound of an instrument and a voice humming in what the translator called a minor key. It sounded like loneliness, like sadness, like beauty found in suffering, who sends their pain into the void as an introduction. Played the entire recording twice more before he realized he had missed 3 scheduled meetings. He pulled up the full survey data on Sol 3. The species called themselves humans. They had achieved atomic energy, landed on their moon, and sent primitive probes to the outer edges of their star system. They had also fought hundreds of wars in just the past century alone, some with weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization. Standard protocol said to ignore them. Species this volatile either matured or died. The council didn't interfere. But something about the message bothered. He read's full report. The artifact called Voyager hadn't been aimed at anyone. The humans didn't know anyone was out here. They had sent it anyway, a message in a bottle cast into an ocean they believed was empty. The report included a translation of the message's introduction, spoken by a human named. We step out of our solar system into the universe seeking only peace and friendship, to teach if we are called upon, to learn if we are fortunate. To teach if called upon, not to learn their place, not to seek permission, to teach. Forwarded the file to the full committee with a note. Requires immediate review, unusual first contact scenario. The response came back within the hour. General of the Empire, this is not a first contact scenario. They lack FTL capability. File and ignore per protocol. Merchant Princess Salix of the agreed, though the pulsar map is noted, may be worth monitoring for trade potential in 500 cycles. Formation 7 of the Silicate Collective. Data insufficient for classification. Recommend continued observation. But then a fourth response appeared, and this one made throat pouches flutter with surprise. It was from the office of the council speaker herself. The committee will review this matter in full session. Attendance mandatory. The human message will be presented to the council within 3 rotations. Read the message 3 times. Full sessions were reserved for matters of galactic importance. Wars, territorial disputes, the addition of new council members, not messages from pre-FTL species that didn't even know they were being heard. He forwarded the speaker's order to the committee members and began preparing his presentation. Something was happening here, something that violated his understanding of how the galaxy worked. Species didn't get council attention before they achieved FTL. They certainly didn't get it before they achieved planetary unity. Yet here he was, about to present a message from a divided, primitive, violent species to the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. The Golden Record, as the humans had called it, sat in his office in a secure container, had retrieved it personally, carefully extracting it from the Voyager probe without disturbing anything else. The artifact itself was beautiful in its simplicity. Gold-plated copper, etched with diagrams and carrying analog audio recordings that were already obsolete by the time it left Earth's atmosphere. Played it one more time, listening to the laughter of human children, the sounds of their weather, the music that ranged from ancient to modern by their standards. He heard pride in their achievements and hope for their future. He heard fear and courage and curiosity. What he didn't hear was submission. They weren't asking permission to exist. They were simply existing, and they wanted to share that existence with whoever might be listening. 3 rotations later, stood in the council chambers holding a species' entire introduction to the galaxy in his hands. The assembled representatives waited in silence. Some looked curious. Others looked annoyed at having their schedules disrupted. Activated the playback. Greetings from the children of planet Earth. For the next 2 hours, the council listened. At first, many representatives worked on other matters, their attention divided. But slowly, the side conversation stopped. The data pads went dark. Even General, famous for never sitting still during sessions, remained in his seat. When it ended, the silence stretched for a full minute. Then General stood. This species is dangerous. They have documented their own violence, their own capacity for destruction, yet they send it proudly into space. They are unstable, unpredictable, and they've announced their location to anyone listening. I recommend immediate quarantine classification. Merchant Princess Salix rose next. On the contrary, General, they've shown remarkable honesty. They've included both their achievements and their failures, and that pulsar map shows a willingness to be vulnerable for potential gain. These are traders at heart. I recommend monitoring with intent for eventual trade agreements. Formation 7's crystalline structure pulsed with light as it spoke. This committee operates on the assumption that pre-FTL species seek guidance from elder races. This message contains no such request. They have not asked for permission, instruction, or validation. They have simply declared themselves. The mathematical models do not account for this variable. The debate continued for 4 hours, longer than any could remember. Species who rarely spoke in council chambers offered opinions. The representative pointed out that humanity's message of peace and friendship was more generous than the terms many current council members had received when they first made contact. That comment caused an uncomfortable stir among the elder species. Finally, the council speaker called for proposals. Ignore them per protocol. Initiate early contact with restrictions. File them as prohibited contact due to danger. Rose from his seat in the rear of the chamber, where the unaligned system sat. I invoke Protocol 7, Article 3. Any member may request formal response to a message of peace, regardless of the sender's technological status. The chamber erupted. Protocol 7 hadn't been used in 11,000 years. Most representatives didn't even know it existed. The speaker checked the ancient texts. After 10 minutes, she looked up. The protocol is valid. The council must now vote not on whether to contact humanity, but on what message to send in return. Felt the galaxy shift beneath his feet. The vote took 3 days. 3 days of arguments, negotiations, threats, and promises. The founding species wanted to maintain protocol. The younger species saw an opportunity. The unaligned system saw something else entirely, proof that a species could be valid without council approval. In the end, cast the deciding vote. He voted to send nothing, not because humanity didn't deserve a response, but because he feared what responding would do to the carefully ordered galaxy he had spent 2 centuries maintaining. The message from Earth would be filed, noted, and stored, nothing more. But had already shared the golden record across the galactic information networks. Within days, it was everywhere. On every station, every planet, every ship that traveled between the stars. The galaxy was listening to humanity's music, and the galaxy was starting to ask questions that the council could no longer answer. Returned to his office above the council chambers and played Johnny B one more time. He wondered if the humans knew what they had done. He wondered if they ever would. The galaxy had rules, orders, systems that had worked for 47,000 years. But systems changed, and humanity, without even knowing it, had become the catalyst for the biggest change the galaxy had ever seen. Looked out at the stars and felt something he hadn't felt in 200 cycles. He felt uncertain, and strangely he felt alive. The golden record spread through the galaxy like a virus, though that wasn't quite the right word. Viruses were destructive, and this was something else entirely. It was more like a seed finding fertile ground in places no one expected. On Prime, university students gathered in underground clubs to listen to human music and debate human philosophy. The government tried to shut down the gatherings, citing them as disruptive to social order. That only made them more popular. Young who had never questioned the council's authority started asking why humanity needed council approval to exist when they clearly existed just fine without it. Battle stations reported discipline problems. Soldiers were listening to Johnny B before combat drops. Worse, they were improvising during missions, adapting to circumstances rather than following predetermined plans. The old guard saw this as corruption, but casualties were down 17%, and mission success rates had improved. General received reports of junior officers citing human-style creative problem-solving in their after-action reports. He didn't know whether to court-martial them or promote them. They experienced what their historians would later call the art revolution. Young merchants began decorating their ships with color and music. They started trading not just for profit but for beauty, for meaning, for connection. Merchant Princess Salix watched her people transform from pure economic calculators into something more complex, more human. Trade agreements now included cultural exchanges. Profit margins dropped by 4%. Happiness indicators rose by 41%. The Silicate Collective tried to mathematically model human jazz improvisation. They failed. They tried to create algorithms that could compose music like. They failed. They tried to understand how a species could be simultaneously logical and emotional, structured and chaotic, violent and compassionate. They failed. Formation 7 reported to the Council that all their models were wrong. They had built their entire civilization on eliminating chaos, on perfect mathematical order. Humanity proved that chaos could be intentional, beautiful, necessary. The discovery sent shockwaves through Silicate society. Some formations began experimenting with randomness. Others declared it heresy. But the biggest impact was among the unaligned systems. They had been vassals to the Council for 3,000 years. They had voting rights, technically, but those rights were limited. They could vote on minor trade disputes and environmental regulations. They couldn't vote on anything that mattered. Had listened to the Golden Record 47 times. Each time he heard the same message: we exist, we are worthy, we don't need your permission. He began speaking at gatherings. Small at first, just a few dozen discussing what humanity's message meant for them. Then hundreds, then thousands. The gatherings spread to other vassal species, though the methane breathers of the Third Arm. They called themselves the Self-Determined Coalition. Their platform was simple. If humanity could celebrate their existence without council approval, why couldn't they? Ambassador watched all of this from his office and felt the foundations of galactic order cracking beneath him. He had voted to send no message to humanity, to maintain protocol, to preserve stability. Instead, he had created instability on a scale the galaxy hadn't seen since the founding wars. The Council convened emergency sessions weekly now. The founding species tried to contain the damage. They declared the Golden Record classified material. That just made bootleg copies more valuable. They tried to restrict discussions of humanity. That made humanity the most talked-about topic in galactic history. General proposed a military solution. Quarantine the Sol system completely, jam all transmissions in or out, and wait for humanity to die out or forget they ever sent that message. Merchant Princess Salix laughed at him. General, we're 3 spiral arms away from Sol, and they've changed our entire economic system. What exactly do you think a quarantine will accomplish? Formation 7 was more direct. The damage, as you call it, is complete. Humanity has demonstrated that the Council's framework is not universal truth but cultural preference. We cannot unlearn this. They tried to maintain diplomatic control, but even they were fracturing. Conservative insisted on strict protocol. Progressive argued that protocol was clearly outdated if it couldn't account for something as simple as an honest message of greeting. Found himself in an impossible position. He had spent 2 centuries believing in the system. Now he wasn't sure what he believed. He called to his office. The young arrived nervous, probably expecting punishment for distributing the Golden Record. Why did you share it? Asked. Stradermarks flushed with uncertainty. Because it deserved to be heard, Ambassador, because keeping it locked away felt wrong. You violated protocol. Yes. You destabilized galactic politics. I didn't mean to. I just thought people should hear what I heard. Gestured to the data streaming across his screens. Reports of protests, cultural movements, political demands, all of it traced back to that one decision. Do you understand what you've done? I gave them hope, said quietly. The unaligned systems have been vassals for thousands of years. They've followed every rule, met every requirement, done everything the council asked, and they're still vassals. Humanity didn't follow any rules and they're free. That matters to people, ambassador. Wanted to argue, but he couldn't, because was right. 5 years after the Golden Record entered galactic consciousness, the independence movement reached critical mass, stood before the council and delivered an ultimatum: grant the vassal species full voting rights, or the self-determined coalition would leave the council entirely. It wasn't just the anymore. 27 species had joined the coalition. 27 species representing significant territory, resources, and military capability. If they left, the council's power would be cut by nearly a third. The debate lasted for weeks. The founding species argued that tradition couldn't be abandoned on the whim of one pre-FTL species that didn't even know they were being heard. The coalition argued that tradition that served only to maintain power wasn't tradition at all. It was tyranny. The vote came down to the unaligned systems themselves. They had enough votes now combined to force a tie on major issues. Formation 7 would break it. The Silicate Collective's representative pulsed in a pattern that indicated deep processing. Finally, it spoke. We have spent 47,000 years judging who deserves to join us. We have created tests, trials, and requirements that ensure only species we deem worthy earn a voice. But humanity has shown us something we did not account for. Worthiness is not granted. It is inherent. They did not ask our permission to exist, to create, to reach for the stars. They simply did it. Perhaps it is time we prove we deserve to meet them, rather than making them prove they deserve to meet us. The vote passed, barely. The vassal species became full members. The galaxy's political structure, unchanged for 47,000 years, fundamentally transformed in an afternoon. General threw his data pad across the chamber. Merchant Princess Salix smiled quietly, sat very still and wondered if humanity had any idea what they had done. The Empire split, not violently but philosophically. The New Guard, as they called themselves, cited humanity's ability to learn from their mistakes, to grow beyond their violence, to become something better than their history suggested. If humanity could do it, why couldn't they? The traditionalists called them traitors. The New Guard called them progressive. The split was tense but manageable, largely because both factions were too interested in studying this species called humans to waste time fighting each other. 10 years after Voyager crossed into interstellar space, the galaxy was unrecognizable. 300 species had become 300 independent voices. The founding species still held significant power, but it was no longer absolute. Vassal states were now partners. Subjects became citizens. And humanity still didn't know any of this existed. Had nightmares about what would happen when they finally developed FTL. Would they be disappointed? Would they expect this new galaxy they had inadvertently created? Would they even want to join a council that had spent a decade arguing about whether they were worthy? He played the Golden Record again, searching for answers. He had listened to it hundreds of times now. He knew every greeting, every piece of music, every image encoded in its grooves. One section always caught his attention: the sounds of Earth. Wind, rain, thunder, waves crashing on beaches, the voices of their animals from whales to birds to insects, and laughter, so much laughter. A species that included laughter in their introduction to the universe, not just their achievements or their knowledge, but their joy. Realize something then. Humanity hadn't been trying to prove themselves worthy. They had been trying to share themselves honestly and completely. The good and the bad, the beautiful and the terrible, the profound and the mundane. They had been trying to connect. And the galaxy, lonely in ways it hadn't realized, had responded. Formation 7 visited its office, an unusual occurrence. The Silicate Collective rarely engaged in social visits. "You regret your vote," Formation 7 stated. It wasn't a question. "I voted for stability," said. "You voted for a stability that no longer exists, perhaps that never truly existed." Gestured at his screens showing the transformed galaxy. "I did this. My vote against Responding's decision to share the record. We broke everything." Or, Formation 7 pulsed, "You revealed that it was already broken. Ambassador, we built a galaxy where worthiness was determined by those already in power. We told ourselves this was order, but it was simply comfortable. Humanity's message was not revolutionary because of its content. It was revolutionary because of its existence. They didn't ask permission to matter. They simply mattered. And in doing so, they gave others permission to matter too." The Silicate Collective representative left and sat alone in his office, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, 43 light-years away, humanity continued their daily lives. They argued and loved and created and destroyed, completely unaware that they had changed the galaxy forever. Pulled up the Sol system on his monitors. Long-range sensors showed increased activity. More satellites, more space stations, more missions to their moon and neighboring planets. Humanity was still reaching, still growing, still moving forward. His data pad chimed. A priority alert from the monitoring station. "Ambassador, we're detecting unusual quantum fluctuations near Sol. Pattern suggests early FTL experimentation. Probability of successful FTL breakthrough within 1 decade, 73%. Felt his throat pouches contract. They were coming. He forwarded the report to the council with a note. "Recommend immediate preparation for formal first contact with humanity. Time remaining, estimated 10 years. The response from the council speaker came back within minutes. "Agreed. Prepare first contact protocols. Full council vote on humanity's status must occur before they achieve FTL. We cannot afford another surprise." Almost laughed. Another surprise, as if humanity had done anything but surprise them from the beginning. He began drafting the protocols, knowing they would be inadequate. How did you write a protocol for meeting a species that had already changed your entire civilization? How did you explain to them that they had started a revolution without even knowing anyone was listening? He played fifth while he worked. The music was both ordered and chaotic, mathematical and emotional, like humanity itself, like the galaxy had become. Outside his window, the council chambers glowed with activity. Representatives from 300 species debated the future, made plans, prepared for the arrival of the species that had taught them, without meaning to, that connection mattered more than hierarchy. Made a decision. When humanity finally achieved FTL, when they finally realized they weren't alone, the council would be ready. Not with tests or trials or requirements. They would be ready with a simple message. "Thank you. Thank you for teaching us how to be better. Thank you for reminding us why we built this council in the first place. Welcome to Galaxy you've already changed." He just hoped humanity would understand. 47 years after Voyager left Earth's orbit, humanity achieved faster-than-light travel. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, Earth Standard Time, in a research facility in Geneva. Dr. Sarah and her team successfully created a stable quantum tunnel that bent spacetime in ways that should have been impossible. They sent a probe through the tunnel and received its signal back from a point 3 light-years away. The signal arrived instantaneously. The team celebrated for approximately 10 minutes before they realized what they needed to do next. Humanity's first faster-than-light message shouldn't be a test signal or a scientific report. It should be something meaningful. Doctor thought about Voyager, still traveling through the void, still carrying its golden greeting to a universe that hadn't responded. She thought about her grandfather, who had worked on the Voyager project and told her stories about the golden record when she was a child. She composed a simple message and transmitted it toward the general direction of Voyager 1's last known position. To Voyager, we haven't forgotten you, we're coming. The message traveled faster than light, reaching beyond humanity's solar system in seconds. Doctor had no way of knowing that 300 species across 3 spiral arms received her message. She had no way of knowing that the galactic monitoring station in her sector immediately forwarded it to the Council. She had no way of knowing that her simple message of remembrance would trigger the largest emergency council session in galactic history. She just wanted Voyager to know that humanity hadn't given up reaching for the stars. Ambassador received the alert and felt something close to panic. They weren't ready. The protocols weren't finalized. The Council hadn't voted on humanity's status. They had estimated 10 years, and humanity had done it in 3. Of course they had, because humanity didn't follow anyone's timeline but their own. He called an emergency session. Every representative had seen the message. The chamber was already filling when arrived, and the noise level was unprecedented. Excitement, fear, curiosity, and dozens of other emotions filled the space. General stood immediately. We respond now. Before they get any closer, we establish parameters, set boundaries, make clear the rules they must follow. Rose from his seat. With respect, General, that approach has become outdated. The humans have already demonstrated they won't follow rules they didn't help create. We should offer partnership, not dictate terms. Merchant Princess Salix added, the economic implications alone require careful consideration. They've had a decade to develop their own philosophy of trade, influenced by our markets that were influenced by their music. This is unprecedented. Formation 7 pulsed softly. The mathematical probability of this exact moment occurring has been calculated at 1 in 47 million, and yet here we are. Perhaps probability is less relevant than possibility. The debate spiraled. Some representatives wanted to send an immediate welcoming message. Others wanted to establish contact protocols first. A few still argued for maintaining the no-contact policy until humanity formally requested communication. Watched the chaos and made a decision. He stood. The Council will now vote on humanity's official status. I propose full membership, effective immediately upon formal contact, with no trial period, no vassal status, and no restrictions beyond those applied to founding members. The chamber went silent. That's impossible, General said. We've never granted immediate full membership to any species. The protocols, interrupted, were written for a galaxy that no longer exists. Humanity changed our civilization before they even knew we existed. They've earned membership by virtue of already being part of the conversation. Merchant Princess Salix laughed. The human phrase would be putting the cart before the horse. I like it. I vote yes. Formation 7's crystalline structure pulsed in agreement. The mathematics were always insufficient. I vote yes. The vote took 2 hours. It passed with 68% approval, the highest margin for any major council decision in recorded history. Humanity would enter the galactic community not as supplicants or vassals, but as equals. Now they just had to tell humanity. Composed the message himself, using the same mathematical principles included on the golden record. He kept it simple, straightforward, the kind of message he wished the Council had sent 47 years ago. To humanity, we heard you. We've been listening. Welcome to a galaxy you've already changed. He transmitted it toward Earth and waited. The response came 41 hours later. Doctor's voice, slightly confused, definitely excited, absolutely human. This is Dr. Sarah of Earth. Are you saying we're not alone? How long have you been listening? We have so many questions and so much we want to share. Smiled. Of course, their first response would be questions and an offer to share, because humanity didn't change. 3 weeks later, the human ship Resolution entered the Council's sector of space. It was crude by galactic standards, barely holding together, its FTL drive more duct tape and hope than proper engineering. But it worked, because humanity had built it, and humanity's defining characteristic was making impossible things work. Commander Sarah, Doctor's sister, commanded the ship. She transmitted a formal greeting as they approached the Council station, and noticed she sounded neither intimidated nor overwhelmed. Curious, yes. Excited, absolutely, but not subordinate. The Council gathered in formal reception for the first time in 3,000 years. Every representative present, every species watching from their home worlds, every ship in every sector of space tuned to the broadcast. The airlock opened, and humanity walked into the galactic community. Commander was shorter than expected, with dark hair pulled back in a practical style and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She carried a data pad and wore a uniform that was somehow both professional and casual. She looked at the assembled council, 300 species representing 47,000 years of civilization, and smiled. "Thank you for listening," she said. "We were starting to think we were alone out here." General stepped forward. "Do you understand what you've done, what changes you've caused?" Looked confused. "We achieved FTL 3 weeks ago. We sent the message to Voyager. What changes?" Found himself laughing. He couldn't help it. They truly had no idea. "Commander," he said, "perhaps we should start at the beginning. 47 years ago, you sent a message, a golden record carried by a probe you called Voyager." "The golden record." Eyes widened. "You found it. Voyager is still out there. We thought it was too far to wait. 47 years. You've known about us for 47 years. "We've been listening," confirmed, "and your message changed everything." Over the next 6 hours, the Council explained what had happened. The political revolution, the cultural transformation, the fundamental shift in how 300 species understood their place in the galaxy. They showed her the bootleg copies of human music spread across 1,000 worlds. They played her recordings of young debating human philosophy, soldiers using human tactics, merchants creating art. Listened to all of it with an expression that shifted between disbelief and wonder. "We just wanted to say hello," she said finally. "We didn't think anyone would actually hear it." "That," Formation 7 said, "was precisely the point. You sent hope into the void without requiring an audience. You existed without requiring permission. In doing so, you gave others permission to exist too." Approached, his features carefully controlled. "Commander, my people were vassals for 3,000 years. We followed every rule, met every requirement. But we never felt worthy until we heard your music and realized worthiness wasn't something to be granted. It was something we already had. You gave us that gift." Looked overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay," Merchant Princess Salix said. "Say you'll join this council and help us build something better than what came before." "I don't have the authority to." "Actually," interrupted, "you do. The council has already voted. Humanity is granted full membership effective immediately. No trials, no vassal period, no restrictions. You're already part of this, Commander. We're just making it official." Sat down. It wasn't a graceful movement. She just dropped into the nearest chair and stared at them all. "This is insane," she said. "We've been alone for all of human history. Now you're telling me we accidentally started a political revolution in a galaxy we didn't know existed, and we're immediately joining the government. This is completely insane." "Yes," General said, "and yet here we are. The question is, what will you do with it?" Was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her data pad and started typing. "First, I need to call Earth. They're going to think I've lost my mind. Second, we need to establish communication protocols. If we're joining this council, we need to understand how it works. Third, she paused, looking up at them. Third, I think we should throw a party. A party? Asked. First Contact Day, explained. It should be a celebration. Music, food, stories, all of us together learning about each other. You've been listening to our music for a decade. We'd like to hear yours. The council chambers, full of beings who had spent 47,000 years being diplomatic, proper, and controlled, erupted in approval. The party lasted 3 days. Humans arrived from Earth, bringing instruments and recordings and food from every culture. Other species shared their own music, their own art, their own stories. The council chambers, designed for serious political discourse, echoed with laughter and music and the sound of species learning to be friends instead of just allies. Found Commander on the second day, sitting with Formation 7 and listening to silicate harmonic compositions while eating something she called pizza. Do you understand now, asked, what your species did? Nodded. I think so. You were all so focused on being worthy that you forgot why you wanted to be worthy in the first place. We reminded you that it's okay to just be yourself, even if yourself is flawed and messy and sometimes contradictory. Especially then, Formation 7 added, the mathematics of chaos have proven more valuable than the mathematics of order. Sat down beside them. I voted against responding to your message 47 years ago. Looked at him. Why? Because I was afraid of change. I believed in the system we had built. I thought stability was more important than growth. And now, smiled, now I think I was wrong. And I think being wrong was the best thing that ever happened to me. Offered him a piece of pizza, accepted it cautiously, then with more enthusiasm after the first bite. They sat together, human and in silicate, listening to music from 3 different worlds and talking about the future. On Earth, Commander's report caused the expected chaos. World leaders scrambled to form a unified response. Religious leaders,